Good evening and welcome to the second of two meetings of the Board of Education on to get input on the proposed budget, the superintendent's proposed budget for 2017-2018. I think probably most of the details about what Dr. Freeman's proposal has been are been aired both at a public Board of Education meeting. They were aired last night. He did a short presentation about some of the highlights, some of the summary of it, and also it is on our website in several different places, but there's both a couple of video presentations about the budget as well as the numbers. So there is not going to be a presentation tonight of any kind of summary. I think anybody who's here probably has a general idea about what's in the budget. So tonight is really, again, as was last night, just listen to people's thoughts about it. Places that programs that are supported, suggestions for reducing expenditures, thoughts about any new programs, thoughts about the budget in general. The timeline is we're going to vote as a Board of Education on what to send to the Board of Finance. We have a meeting next Monday, I believe, and so assuming we vote then, it'll be presented to the Board of Finance in the middle of February, and then proceed to town meeting, and then to a referendum as modified by the Board of Finance. So. Ground rules there really aren't any ground rules. Just come up and give us your name and address and say what you would like. If you have a lengthy comment, I'd urge you to just think about the other people in the room and maybe pause a little bit. Or if you have multiple comments, that's fine too. But just maybe to make your first comment and then come back after some other people have had an opportunity. We've been very fortunate that the comments, I think, have been very thoughtful, and nobody has taken an amount of time that makes it difficult for everybody to be heard, because we do want, obviously, everybody to be heard. So, with that, who would like to be first? It's always tough to be first, but somebody has to be first, so go ahead.
Lori Laturza, Riverview Drive. So I've seen all of you here before. I've been here for special ed a number of times. And there were a couple of things that I'd like to have you consider, and there's a couple of questions that I actually have about the budget. So a lot of you know, but most of you don't know, my daughter was one of the first children to go through the Bright Connections at Lakes, which was Paul was kind enough to listen to teachers and to pull together a program really on a shoestring, if I could say, and it was done with parents and with donations from people and with community and with support from Yale Child Study. And the program really was, I don't want to say it was an experiment because it was really thought out very well, but I would say that it grew and it took off very successfully, and my child was a product. Sophia started in first grade. She is now in fifth, so we've had this program going for a number of years. And I also saw a lot of you last spring when the special ed was set, and I said my concern is that we had this great program that's brought back a lot of kids to the community, and are we going to be able to continue these services? And I think some of the numbers that went through back then were, we started off with 42 outplacements, we dropped to 29, that's a savings of 13. And if I look at what the Futures Report had back then about kind of an average from an outplacement, that's about 80K. But when I look at the budget, and that was just kind of tuition, the tuition seems to say the same for outplacement. And I know that it is more than what I probably know, but what is in that number? And are there other dollars and other savings there and in transportation that could fund some of the areas that have been cut, like a reduction in para, like professional development? And I say that because you're talking about kids that came back, and we've talked before about tiered paras. They're really different than maybe paras from what we had in the past. And even just overall para support. My child now is in a new program, and when somebody's out sick, which is happening this week for anybody who's out there, she doesn't get to go to her push-outs. And those are critical to her education, but there's not enough staffing. So, last time I was here, I said, let's be creative. And I know we've always had full-time paras, and I don't want to stop that. But what about tiered paras? What about part-time paras to fill in the gaps? What about professional services? I could go down a lot of things, but it's really around the savings that came out of this program, and I appreciate it goes back into the budget to fund a lot of other things, but I'm concerned now about the continuum at Baldwin, at Adams, and then also when we get to the high school, because she's really not that far away. And while she is growing, and I do want her to be independent, she's not completely there yet. So when you take away supports like that, and one of the other things, and I had mentioned this in conversations with Paul about adaptive technologies. We have nothing in our budget for adaptive technologies. We have no adaptive technician. Those are things that don't just help special ed, but can help kids across the board, but we don't have any investment in that. So I guess those are my questions on, what are in those line items? Where are those savings? And how can we be more creative about utilizing them for supports across this community?
So I think there are a couple of, I turn it over to you, but I think there are a couple of different ways to look at that. One is that any para that is part of an IEP, an individual education plan, is obviously not cut. That is going to be funded whether it is in the budget or not. And in fact, from time to time, I think this year in particular, we added paras after the budget was adopted because in order to meet IEPs. So that's...
So there's a couple of things, and we've come a long way on wording of what that para looks like, so different places don't interpret it differently. But it's also, a para still gets breaks and still gets lunch. The child's still going through those programs. And if a para's out sick, there's not necessarily somebody to cover them. When you have multiple people out sick, you have a staff that's there for the perfect nirvana, and we seldom are in nirvana throughout a school year. So what happens is, again, my child last week didn't go to some of her push-outs because there was not enough staff. I don't know the kids in the regular ed don't get science because they're science teachers. I'm sorry, because that was very rude, but I mean, that's the reality. We've cut, and we are short-staffed, and now we're going to continue in this momentum.
Well, so the other half of what I was going to say is I don't think that the intent of the Bright Connections program was to save money to put into other programs, and in fact that isn't what has happened. I think there were two intents of really the direction that we've tried to go with special ed and the outplacements. One is to not save money to put into the regular ed program, but to save money to save money. In other words, the intent wasn't to take the money that would have been spent on the outplacements and put it into some other program, rather not to spend the money in the first place, because it is, as you know, it's extremely expensive on some of the tuition outplacements, and the graph of our tuition outplacement spending before we started to try to bring more students back in district was really unsustainable, and it was, and I think a lot of districts are facing this problem right now. This issue, and I think we've been as creative and thoughtful as we could to try to bring these students back in. Not only, but the second part of what I wanted to say, though, the second reason that we went down this road in developing this program was to provide a better quality service, and I think you've talked about that. This is one of these. Not every area in public education or in government generally results in both greater customer, client, parent, student satisfaction and a cost savings. It's a rather unusual pairing. So, but I'll let Dr. Freeman answer some of your specific concerns about staffing, the adaptive technologies question. I think Mrs. Brown was here last night,
right.
And I don't, were you here last night?
No.
I apologize. I could only.
That's okay.
One night.
No, that's fine. No. You don't need to apologize. We're the ones who are doing are at all these meetings, and you don't have to be. But Mrs. Brown was actually here last night, and we talked quite a bit about the state of the special ed program, and there is some great uncertainty about special ed funding from the state. There's a case in the United States Supreme Court right now about what are the expectations of districts. I'm sure you know about that.
Oh, yeah.
What are the expectations of districts on special education students? And so it is a time of very substantial uncertainty, but I guess I'll ask you to respond to some of the specific thoughts.
Yeah, we did talk at some length last night about the programming component that is slated to go into Adams this year, so that we're continuing to grow out the continuum of programs as they move through. The futures report that you referenced, one of the specific recommendations in the future report was to look at the number of paraprofessionals that were on staff in Guilford and to look not to simply cut the number, but to look at using them differently, so that we're not looking to have a one-to-one para partnership with a student, but to know at what points during the day students need coverage, and to have paras who are being used flexibly, so that you don't run into a student being without support during a break or during a lunch break. And what we've done is very carefully tried to look at where we place paras and try to state it differently in IEPs, try to schedule it differently at the school level, and try to be both supportive and efficient in using those numbers. In fact, every year, I think we have added para positions after the budget has closed. And I noted in one of our previous meetings that at the staffing level, paraprofessionals are the most volatile area. We know going into a school year how many teachers we're going to need and how many custodians we're going to need. We don't always know exactly the needs of paras, and that number does move during the course of a school year more than any other number. Part of what has been done is remember that as we've rolled out these programs, we've also increased the number of special ed teachers in the school district. We brought back a special education administrative position, and this year in your budget, we're adding a half-time school psychologist position to support those positions as well. So paras are essential, but those certified positions are essential as well. And Lori and I have had this conversation. We're growing a program, and she and her family are at the cutting edge of that program. And so I appreciate you acknowledging that it's not experimental, but it is new, and we are learning as we grow these programs. And every year we've made adjustments and we've made changes, and we'll continue to do that to try to be responsive to the needs of the families and the students that are in those programs.
So just a couple of things. And I appreciate that Sophia's been in this program. I don't want her to constantly be new. It's been 4 years. We knew she was going to Baldwin. We know she's going to Adams. We know she's going to high school. From a para perspective, and it's really not just about the paras, even the psychologist, while I can appreciate the role that a psychologist is, we really need a BCBA. We really need an adaptive technician. So part of it, and we've talked about this, and this is where I came to that creative part, we need input from the parents, and we need input from the community, and we need input from the teachers, because while I applaud the decisions, I don't know that they're necessarily the right ones given some of the set of the people in these areas. And even with the paras, and I appreciate saving money, but if you're gonna, some of the supports that we're talking about aren't $80,000 per annual per child. And you can't bring back some of these kids that have been outplaced because we couldn't support them here and not create the same supports here. So again, it does kind of go back to, I look at the tuition line, and this is my own ignorance, but I looked at it across 5 years, and it's gone from 2.8 to 3 million up and down, yet I calculate $1 million of savings. And that doesn't even include bus transportation. And I'm not a huge mathematician, but I do wonder, where is that money, and where is it going to, and how much has been taken out of tuition and reinvested back into training,
Right.
modalities, adaptive technology.
That's a question I failed to respond to. I forgot that one. Every year, the way we budget tuition is to look at actual students who are in the pipeline and what their expenditures will cost next year. So there isn't a certain allocation for special education or regular education or tuition versus in-district students that we could say we didn't spend these tuition dollars and therefore they're available next year. We literally start with a zero-based budget for tuition and budget the dollars that we know we will need for the students we have in front of us this year. We look at what their needs are going to be next year, and we simply budget for those costs. So the programming that we have done in district, I think last night Mrs. Brown suggested that we have approximately 80 students who are in these in-house programs from K through high school. High school programs are in place. We started at the elementary and the high school and worked our way into the middle with Adams this last year. But we can certainly suggest that of those 80 students, some of them would be outplaced, and so therefore we have created costs that we have avoided by serving these children at home. But as you said, we haven't gone out and worked to rip students out of current placements and bring them home. We haven't generated savings. There aren't dollars that are left unused that could be rolled back in. There's money that we haven't had to spend because we planned out in front of these students. But we simply budget tuition by looking at next year, looking at who we know is still going to be with us next year, and budgeting for those students. We then try to allow a small allocation for students we're unaware of yet, and the board knows as well as anybody, every year we end up short in tuition because we're budgeting for real students, and when somebody has a new emergent need or when a new student moves into town, we hadn't put specific dollars away. So those students are therefore, we plan for those students within the budget year. There isn't a set pot of unspent dollars that can be rolled back in. We do have a staff position who responds to adaptive technology needs, but we don't have a dedicated position. You're exactly right. And years ago, we talked about not having a transition specialist on district. Jim Murtagh, who is our technology integration specialist, does work with integrated technology concerns as they arise. It is not a dedicated position, and it's not necessarily his area of expertise, but he is somebody who supports us in those positions. At times, we will still contract out for support with adaptive technology. It's not a position that we have in district as a dedicated position. You're exactly right.
That's a question. So I was looking at the futures report from 2012, which I assume you're familiar with as far as, and I was actually wondering, it said in there that I guess we were using ACES for BCBA, and that we had someone who was training for that. What became of that as far as?
We do contract out for BCBA support.
What is BCBA
Yeah.
support?
It's behavioral supports. I'm not exactly sure what
They
the
basically cover their behavioral issues as well as learning issues. So particularly with my daughter, she doesn't have behavioral issues, but there are behaviors that happen based on her school day. So they look at what are those visual supports and what are those cueing supports that she needs so that she can be in her classroom as much as possible. So it's not just a behavioral issue like they're bolting. It goes across the gamut on what supports are they needed to be included as much as possible.
We do have behavioral support that works in district, and it tends to still be contracted out. But we have behavioral experts or specialists who work in district the full 180 days.
Because the other thing that report noted was just the sort of outlier that our district was in terms of the ratio of paras to special needs. I mean, I suppose those are driven a lot by the IEPs, but, you know.
Outlier in,
we have a high ratio of paras to the special needs.
We also had a higher ratio of paras compared to certified staff members serving in the special education areas. And so we talked about as we came in that it would take time to build capacity and build trust before we would be able to address all of the concerns. We didn't come out in a response to the futures report and say there's going to be a 10 or 15 or 20% reduction of paras in 1 year. In fact, the para concern has been something that we have tried to address slowly over the last 5 years. It is a worrying concern. The students that are in these programs are going through programs that we are developing that are new to us. The para support is helpful for us on our side, and it's certainly supportive and comforting to the parents and the students that there's somebody there. So that is something, in fact, I think last year there was a question from either this board or the Board of Finance about why that recommendation was left unaddressed in the futures report. It's one that we're trying to deal with slowly and thoughtfully and plan for it rather than simply making a reduction.
Because in 2012, we had 84 devoted to people services, and now we're at 83, and we have fewer in-district students.
We have more in
no,
We have more in district, so right, we have greater need because of the increase of program, and we have maintained that level of
Maintain the number.
staffing.
Right, okay. Obviously, yeah.
I mean, it's one of those areas that I would love to, we talked about, again, having a committee, because paras aren't just there for support for parents and a kid. They're the teacher for the child. They're the ones who learn from the special ed teacher and the OT and the PT and the speech person and implement those services in their classroom on a day-to-day basis, at recess, at lunch, learning math. They really are teaching, at least at the level where they are with my child. They're not a babysitter. They're not sitting there to make sure she doesn't get hurt, although that is one of the qualifications, but they are actually implementing her program. And they are critical to creating the aspects of her dependence and pulling away and creating modifications so that she can, excuse me, at some point in time, hopefully manage on her own. I think every child is different, and in my case, it's critical. She's come a long way, and she does a lot of stuff with the parents standing behind, but we're not ready to pull that yet. And those days that she's not in that classroom are crucial because that's 3 days out of her routine, and then it's starting all over again. And the transitions and all those other things. So they're not minute, and it is one of those things where even again, looking at the tuition, I can appreciate what you said. I'd still love to understand how it stayed the same, and maybe I just missed a year where it was 5 million, I don't know.
Because the prices go up.
That's right.
Yeah, boy,
The
the
cost.
prices
And I can
really do
appreciate
go
that, but
We-
there's
we-
still 13 kids that came back. So you're talking about $1 million in savings that might have gone up per year, and maybe it did, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Well, they
It's the
didn't-
communication that the parents don't understand. So we look at it and see, where'd the money go? I'm losing all these other services, and that's where I think having some of the
Well,
dialogue in a committee would be helpful.
I think that's a great
Right,
idea.
yeah, and what I don't want you to hear from me is that I don't think paras are important, and I don't think that parent participation is valuable. Those are two very good points that you've made very well tonight, and that's a comment that is just well taken and will continue to be part of our work moving forward.
And one of the hardest things to do is compare district to district in special education budgets, because different districts call some services different things, and they either, some put it in the special education line, some people put it in other lines. However, we spend, it was 20, I'm going to say 20, was it 25%, 24%, depending, again, on how it's
Depending on how
accounted,
you count, yes, it could be close to 25% of our budget.
is a special ed. And that's a not insignificant. And that is, I think, very comparable to most other
So again,
high
I'd
achieving
love to,
districts.
because again, I'd love to look at those, because as I went down through the line items, I got a lower number, and that's fine. To me, it's not about the money, it's about how do we continue the services? We brought these kids back for a lot of reasons, and there was a lot of savings, and there were a lot of costs to come in. It's more, how do we continue this and kind of not on their back, so to speak?
It's also
Because
hard, I'm sorry.
that's kind of the key piece. We know they're going up. How do we prepare for that? I know we're in this year's budget and we're in this year's referendum, but how do we prepare for that? And how do we make sure there's professional development happening in high school now for these kids that are going to come up? Those are the types of things, and I don't think they're done here at the Board of Ed, but those are the things that I would love to have, more communication between pupil services and the parents and the community. I mean, if you look at Unified Sports, created by parents, but there are kids in this entire community that are waiting in line to get into Unified Sports. You could argue that it has been a benefit for this entire community, as has, and the R word. I hear kids, the Courier had an article about a student who loved being part of Unified Sports, and will carry that forward as a profession. So I'm not just fighting here for my kid, or for special ed kids, I'm fighting for, what really is the right thing to do that we've already built, and now let's keep it going. And I've taken way too much time to here, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
The only comment I had on that is, I think it's tough to count the number of outplacements. We've had like vastly differing amounts that one outplacement, and we had some very sort of staggering amounts
Yes.
that we paid. So I think just counting the numbers makes it tough to.
A single, a single outplacement can be, well, 2/10 of our budget.
Yeah. We had a five.
And sometimes you don't know, at the beginning of the year, you think you're going to have 29 outplacements, and then come the middle of October, you've got 33.
Correct.
And there's nothing we can do about that. And actually, the state made a decision, the Attorney General has issued a decision that says that when DSS places a child and an outplacement, it used to be, until about 2 months ago, that the state paid for that. Now the state says, well, we were wrong all along, it's your responsibility, local school districts. So even though you have no role, even though you, the superintendent, has no role in outplacing, the person who's making the outplacement has no responsibility for the financial burden of the outplacement, which is a big change, and it's something that has affected local school districts. And the excess cost grant issue, we talked about that a lot last night. Every signal we get from the state is that they're going to be contributing less toward outplacements. I don't think anybody's happy about that here. The federal government originally promised to pay 40% of special education costs globally. To say that promise was broken quite quickly would be an understatement, but now they give us less than 1%. So it is a very, very complicated area, and I think we are going to do our best. And I think, if you want to consider, I think we all probably think that a committee, study group way of communicating back and forth is probably a great idea.
There's lots of vehicles, yes.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of ways that we can have those conversations and take advantage of the knowledge that the parents have.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. Somebody else? Next. Go ahead.
As a step-parent,
Can you come up to the front, please? Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay. It's all right. I don't want to take up much time myself. My name is Christine Hunt. I'm at 1064 Brookville Road. We were here at the last meeting a few months back discussing the cheerleading. We were just wondering if that's still being considered in the program.
It is in Dr. Freeman's proposed budget, yes. I think he talked last night, that also has a minimum participation level?
Yes. So
Okay.
It's not even just, I don't mean to cut you off, it's not just for the cheerleaders now, but you're also talking about the youth cheerleaders who are yet to come. They're starting at junior high, even elementary school kids are still doing it, but unfortunately they don't have them for the high school coach.
This budget includes funding that would afford cheerleading in next school year, so it does nothing to address this year's situation. But there would be monies for a cheerleading coach so that come September, the high school would have the opportunity for cheerleading. I have suggested in this year's budget that any money allocated for a sports program, there would be an expectation of participation of at least 10 students. And so whether it's cheerleading that's just coming back or swimming that is a new proposal or any existing program, I think that in difficult budget times, we should have an expectation that an expenditure for a coach or other related expenses would have at least 10 students to participate. So if there's that level of interest, there will be cheerleading at Guilford High School next year if the board continues to include it in the budget. It's in my proposed budget. The board has not finalized their budget at this time.
Okay.
Right.
Just
Caught
want to make
myself
sure
on that
it's
one.
being considered at least.
It is.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Phil, may I just ask a clarifying
Sure.
question? At what point will we determine that, right? We need to hire a coach before we have kids?
So
We need a commitment from kids before we hire a coach?
we can release coach hire letters that are contingent upon at least this many students enrolling. And then if we don't have that number of students enrolled by a different date we'll do fall, winter, and spring seasons, we can set a date. And any group that doesn't have an enrollment of 10 by that date, then the coach would be told the
Okay.
contingent letter is being withdrawn and will withhold payment.
Does it seem, can I ask a question? Does it seem likely that there would be at least 10 kids that would be interested?
It would, I think, for the football season. I think where we see a drop is maybe in the basketball season, especially this year, because it's hard to get girls to commit to something that's nothing. And I think the girls did, we had 8 girls through the football season, and they were not a sport, and they weren't a club.
Okay.
We
So,
transported them, we've gotten them there, and I think they did a really great job, and Mr. Vicente and Mr. Jarvis have been fantastic through the football season, trying to allow the girls to do what they could to feel, like they were still, cheering for the teams. And I think it was well received from the parents and the players. We did definitely see the drop in football season, so, I mean, maybe it would be something that, at the very least, was considered maybe just for the fall, worst case scenario, because I think the big thing for cheerleaders is that football season.
Yes.
And I think that's the big draw, and I think that the players love that and the parents love that. And if we could at least get it for that, I'm almost, certain we can get it a minimum of 10 girls for that.
That would be great.
okay, so that's something to keep.
Basketball season, they can allow it at least maybe just for that, for football.
This would allow for that.
So that's something.
This would allow for football and basketball, or just football season. The way it's structured allows for that.
That would be great if we had the opportunity to at least, and I get that, I completely understand the minimum participation, and if we could get that, I think that's definitely fair, and I think the girls would be happy with that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, others, please. So you didn't move quickly enough. You should have. You're right there, and you didn't.
Hi, my name is Laura Grom. I live at 39 Brookside Drive. My daughter Bella is in Baldwin with life skills, and a lot of, I think I speak for myself and a lot of special ed parents. We were wondering, various scenarios we're hearing about the program at Adams next year for the life skills. We just wanted maybe someone to summarize, is there a plan next year? Because it seems, right now, I know you're revamping the life skills area, and you're, trying to, our kids are all individual, and it is so hard, I know, to get the program straight, because I also work at Lakes, I'm your permanent sub at Lakes. So I'm very familiar with the, special ed program, but my child's moving to Adams, and a lot of our kids at Adams, and we're wondering, how are you going to summarize what's going to happen next year with all our kids?
So there is a plan. This budget does afford for a program to be embedded at Adams that would be similar to the program that we grew out at Lakes a number of years ago, that transitioned into Baldwin just a couple of years ago, and will now move into Adams. There are monies in the maintenance budget to allow for, it's either 2 or 3 rooms to be renovated, so that there will be rooms to support the program. We have an allocation for a teaching position. There is a 0.5 school psychologist position that would support the program currently at Baldwin and the one at Adams. And we have looked at paraprofessional staffing so that there would be paras to support that programming as well. So a number of years ago, we began growing out programs at Lakes, and we worked with our 18 to 21-year-old programming. And then the high school, we started at the two ends and came together. With this program being placed at Adams this coming September, it would be the last piece that would create a continuum for us from pre-K all the way through age 21. It is a program that is intended to be able to support what we have known as life skills programs, but also for students who are on the autism spectrum or can benefit from supports and from instruction like students on the autism spectrum, the behavioral supports that we talked about earlier.
So that's what our group here is, kind of mixed with autism and life skills. And we wanted to know, how many teachers, we're going to have 2 programs, 2 rooms, because we know they're so individual, all our kids, but yet they are a unit at the same time.
The other thing that having all of the components in place will allow us, and we talked about this 4 years ago as we were just growing out, is that what we don't want to do is we don't want to say, Adams has a program with 2 teachers and this many paras and this much support, and some years it's overcrowded and some years there's not enough students. So what we will do is we will have teaching and related supports and para supports from pre-K all the way through the 12th grade, and those supports will move and be where the students need those supports as they move through the program. So staffing might be 2 teachers at Baldwin this year, but 1 at Adams, and then as a bubble moves into Adams, it could be 2, and so those positions will be able to move up and down that continuum, supporting the needs that the kids have as they move through that continuum. But we need the locations in each building, we need the staff so that they are flexible to move,
And then we have to have the number,
need the
the
expertise
kids
and the
number.
experience. There's
Right.
training and there's practice and there's appropriate hires that go along with that as well. So yes, this budget does afford for that programming at Adams next year.
And just a quick question, so how would you get your numbers, you took your numbers for next year, because our kids, are in 2 rooms at Baldwin, and it's a little off, there's 4 and there's 6, so moving to the transition of Adams, some kids are staying, some kids are leaving.
So Mrs. Brown and the special ed coordinators and the teachers at each building are working on those transitions and those plans right now, and I just can't speak to that level of specificity at a meeting like this. So we're putting the space and the funding and the staffing in place, and then every year it would be Mrs. Brown and the special ed coordinators who work at each of the 3 levels, and then the teachers who know the students the best planning that, right? And again, we expect it to be flexible and in fact nimble so that we can adjust year to year to meet the needs of the students as they come up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now?
Hi. My name is Terry O'Hara, and I live at 160 Valley Shores Drive, Guilford. I just wanted to express my support for a swim team for Guilford High School. I recognize this is in the preliminary budget. I just wanted this on the record. School spirit within your school, extremely valuable. A special note for the inclusive nature of these swim teams, similar to track, which is unbelievable where you don't most anybody who's interested can compete and practice. The benefits of the competitiveness within a school, the school itself is invaluable. Memories that you have and what it does for yourself for the rest of your life. The school spirit, the school sports in general at Guilford are phenomenal. The experience of the Guilford High School swim team as part of the Brantford swim team was beautiful, but it can be much more beautiful when it's within your own school with your own teammates and it's just yours. So I express my support. My daughter Anna Regal had a really beautiful experience with Brantford and with Guilford this past year, and we hope we can make it better next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please.
To piggyback on the swimming theme, my name is John Moriarty, 72 Spruce Hill Drive. I work for Yale University, and when I get up to give a talk, I have to give a conflict disclosure. I have an 8th grader who's a swimmer, and she has come and talked with this group before. I just wanted to add a couple other points in my role as an educator for the medical school. All of the things that you said about swimming are incredibly true, but I also want to add that one of the things I do for the medical school is recruit medical students from around the country to come and be residents in internal medicine at Yale. And I can tell you, as I look at about 2,000 applications a year for about 18 positions, that competitive swimmers are overrepresented. And I think that has something to do with the nature of the sport, the commitment of the individuals who swim, the tenacity with which they approach not only the sport, but their daily lives. And I really think that actually having that added push to the school will not only add the spirit of sport, the spirit of camaraderie, the spirit of inclusivity, but also really actually support additionally the outstanding academic programs that Guilford already supports. I appreciate your continued support of the swim team at Guilford High School, and I can guarantee you at least 10, if not many more, based on the numbers that I've seen from a lot of people that are in the room. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Others? No, I think, I think she's leaving, so.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's okay. No, that's fine. No, you are not stuck here. Once it's not one of those, it's not like your class.
You're not.
There's no formal dismissal.
That's right.
I'm Duffy Mudry. I live at 70 Oxbow Lane in Guilford, and I am here for the swim team as well. I want to thank you for considering it in your budget, and being here last night, I can't even imagine how hard it is to make the budget that you guys are doing and trying to not have a big increase and then adding a totally new program. So I thank you, and I also want to reiterate, I don't want to say the same thing that everyone else has said. We've said it a bunch of times, but I also want to say in terms of parents, swimming parents are very motivated. They're hard workers. They have to work at every swim meet, whether it's being a timer or official or working concessions or something. They're very used to working. So we will work to help you guys with this budget and getting the vote out. And I want to thank you again for considering it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Hi guys, Craig Kenneth Perry, 211 Three Corners Road. I'm here to talk again about school start times in the district. To give you guys my background, I have 2 boys who are 6 and 9. I'm also a pediatric sleep doctor. I direct the sleep program at the hospital for children. And by the way, an invitation to you guys, anyone here, it's the first National Start School Later Conference this April. Actually funded by some people who supported the effort in Greenwich. So if you guys want to come, they're It's not that expensive. I'm here, for those of you who aren't familiar with the issue, because the start times in Guilford are among the earliest in the nation. About 90% of schools start after 7:30 in the morning. And we know that early school start times are associated with sleep deprivation in teenagers. Approximately 90% of teenagers in the US are getting an insufficient amount of sleep at night. And we know that this is associated with a myriad of side effects, as diverse of increased risk of car accidents, increased rates of obesity and hypertension, increased rates of depression, suicidality, and substance abuse. And the primary determinant of how much sleep teenagers get is the time when they get up in the morning. This is not to make excuses for them, because they do need to have good sleep hygiene. And I appreciate, too, the efforts that Chris and the rest of the board is making to look at the issue of homework, which for at least some kids in the district, but not all of them, may be somewhat burdensome. It needs to be standardized. The reason I'm here specifically tonight is because there's been some discussion about a recent study. When we were discussing this issue last year, we had looked at the amount of time we could get for various scenarios where we changed the budgets. At that point, Dr. Freeman had asked, was there any benefit to a 15-minute time change, and there hadn't been very much evidence for this. However, in the last year, there was a study published looking at a start time change of about 15 minutes. This was looking at 2 districts in Hong Kong, so it's different from here. The primary concern of parents with any start time change in the United States usually is around budget costs or sports schedules. In Asia, it is around extra time to cram for exams. They compared 2 secondary schools, which equivalent here to like 7th through 12th grade. One district, they moved the start times from 7:45 to 8 a.m., and the other district, they kept them at 7:55. So it was a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison. This was a small change and actually didn't seem to result in a huge change in the amount of sleep the teenagers were getting. However, the teenagers all reported improvement in their subjective mental health, and they also used some objective measures, basically based on surveys of parents, et cetera. And they found that the students in the school where they made a change had an increase in pro-social behaviors, improvement in peer relationships, improvement in attentiveness, and a decrease in emotional problems and behavioral difficulties. In spite of the difficulties associated with the change, teachers, parents, and students were all happy with the change that had been made. Now, of course, this is a school district halfway around the world, so it's a little bit different from here. However, when we were researching options last year, it looked like we could potentially make a 15-minute time change without a significant cost change. It's hard to say that things would exactly be cost neutral because of the complexity of the busing that we have here. But I think that it is worth revisiting this topic because it doesn't look like we're going to have a lot of extra money coming in the budget anytime soon. It may be worthwhile trying to get the changes which we can get. I think certainly we have to look at the effects of all the children in the district, and the cheapest way to do this, was my understanding, is moving everything later by 15 minutes. Look, I've got elementary school kids. They're up at 7 in the morning, and I'm not dying to have them start school later. But I do feel strongly that there are clear health benefits for the students in the district. And I'm here because selfishly, I worry about my 9-year-old who's in 4th grade is now used to get up at 6:30 or 7. Now he's getting up at 7:20, 7:30. Now, next year when he gets on the bus, he's going to have to get up well before this time to do this. And this is a change that can potentially benefit all of the children in the district. It's great that everyone here is advocating for kids with all diverse interests and needs, but I think this is something that can really help the health of all of the children here in town. So I'd ask you guys to please consider this possibility. I've talked to Jenny Fredericks, who I think was working with you guys on the homework issue as an education researcher at Conn College. We certainly could work on structuring this with you and also judging how effective this intervention is, because I do think that any changes we make, we have to look at the impact and the benefit to our students. So that's what I just wanted to say on the topic.
So, I think that's all. that's probably something we don't have to look at as part of the budget process, because I would guess that's as close to revenue neutral as.
It's as close to, neutral as you're gonna get, yes.
So that's something I think we can talk about, not in developing the spending priorities, but like everything else with this issue, it is not uncomplicated. We actually we had a meeting with the principals of leadership team last week, week before, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks.
And there, I will tell you, there is some concern, we talked a little bit about this, and there is some concern among elementary school parents that there would be children that were not getting home until between.
Close to 5.
Yeah, late. Maybe that's worth it. Maybe there's a way to make it more efficient. As you know, we kind of took some tentative first steps at trying to make our busing more efficient this year. If we could take some additional steps that might result in elementary school children not being as late as they are now, even or maybe being just as late as they are now with a later start time. I mean, maybe that's a reasonable outcome, but.
Well, I think, referring to the cluster stops, I've certainly gotten some feedback from families that their children are grateful even from the extra 5 minutes of sleep that some of them have received from more efficient bus times. Because I think we have to look at lots of different ways.
You weren't answering the phone.
No, I know.
I will tell you, just that as small as the steps were, it took a tremendous amount of district time, employee time, to try to work issues out, and I think people are more comfortable with it right now. But even a very small change generated a lot of attention and a lot of work.
The number of appeals that came in on that, and the amount of time I think Jason in particular and you spent on, because it went from the original appeal and then it would go up the level, and I think about half of them.
Yeah, there were approximately 180 unique appeals. Some of those were cleared off at the transportation office level, some at Mr. Bowden's level, some at my level, and some went all the way to a Board of Education hearing. And yet we ultimately compromised on close to half of those that did appeal. There was compromise or change or simply returning to the original stop in almost half of those cases.
And it is part of moving the culture, moving what are the expectations, what is reasonable, what's fair.
See, the other thing at that discussion, and this is a little bit off topic for the budget, I understand, but the thing that hit me most powerfully actually was Paula, the principal up at Jones, talked about like the optimal learning time for the elementary kids. So if you're going to bump things back 15 minutes, I mean, these are kids, and I know they get up, 7:30, like they're up, ready to go, and they're ready to shut down or 6:30. Yeah, by 2 o'clock they're like ready to go to sleep. And so that her concern was that actually moving 15 minutes back, would have an adverse impact on elementary school kids' learning. I'm not saying that I don't know where that balance is at.
Oh, no, I hear you. I think the flip side is that the first period and maybe the second period are occurring during teenagers' biological sleep periods.
Yeah, no,
and
they're missing out
just
on
because
multiple
things have
learning.
been done a certain way doesn't mean it's
No,
the right spot.
I'm just pointing out that it isn't just
Oh,
that
no,
easy, and there's downsides potentially that are not budgetary.
Oh, here. I would just close by saying, I know from your standpoint it's a complicated issue. From my standpoint, it's a simple issue because it's a health issue. Just like when we had smoking sections in the high school when I was there, which doesn't seem like that long ago, which seems kind of nuts now, right? That a 14-year-old could go out and smoke on their lunch break. But you're right, the culture does have to change, but I think we also have to push it because any change, you're going to meet resistance.
Well, so I'm going to throw out one other possibility that we've kind of hinted at a couple of times, that is to say that it's a complicated situation. One of the reasons that this is hard for Guilford is because we have 3 separate bus waves, and one of the half, well, 2/3 of them are to centralized schools, right, between Baldwin and Adams and the high school, and combined with the fact that Guilford is, I think, I keep telling people it's the second largest town in the state of Connecticut by land mass, by geographic area, and I think that's right. If I say it enough, it becomes right. It's very long. Yeah, I mean, we have buses that go into Durham and 2 different routes, and into Madison and into Branford to get kids, and because of cut-off cul-de-sacs and so forth. So what if Guilford went to 2 5 to 8 schools? Baldwin is a 5 to 8 school for North Guilford and the Lakes area. Adams is a 5 to 8 school for downtown and the central part of town. Boy, please, whoever is listening to this, don't say, gee, the Board of Education proposed doing that. But that is a way that would make busing easier, because you could do the waves in a completely different method, and you might be able to save quite a bit of busing time. But
I think
are there
so.
consequences to that?
Right.
You bet. And would there be community support for that? I don't know. And that is, but that is, I will tell you, that's not an issue that we could decide between
Guilford
now and.
used to be that way.
Guilford did used to be that
6 to
way.
8.
They went 6 to 8, 2 6 to 8 schools. So I don't know. I mean, that's maybe a little bit of an out-of-the-box possibility that would save a lot of transportation time.
Well, it tends
no
to be
cost.
cheaper too. I mean, every town is different, of course. I know that Greenwich is a much more rectangular or sort of square-shaped town, but they actually realize a significant bus savings when they change the start times. And every town is different, of course.
How did they do that? Do you know?
Recognize the
I haven't the
savings.
faintest.
Well, okay.
My latest
But let's
information
look.
was that they encountered a significant cost increase when they made the changes. I could look into it.
I don't see how it would
But I want to throw out a caution too. Changing those 2 schools might generate some savings in some areas, but could come with significant costs.
That's right.
We would now need 2 baseball teams, 2 softball teams, 2 basket. We would have to think
isn't a bad
differently,
thing.
right? So it could come with costs that we're not thinking of at the moment, where you think it could.
No, listen, I did not propose that we go to 2
I just
5
wanted
to
to
8
hear
schools.
that again. Thank you.
Yes, I understand, but I mean, but there's nothing wrong with looking at
Absolutely not, right.
Well,
alternatives.
it doesn't, I'm not
Especially
promoting
when-
or not promoting, but it does also, we have heard a bit from special ed parents and regular ed parents, I've heard over the years, it does help with the transition
Absolutely.
issue of these quick 2-year transition periods that really are disruptive to special ed and regular ed
That's
students.
absolutely right. Yep.
I would like to thank you for coming back again, because I think this is a really important issue, and I don't want it lost in the shuffle of everything else. I also want to echo what you were kind of saying at the end. When we consider that and we talk about it and concerns come up, and I think we have to be careful not to pit one age group against another, because they're all, at some point, one of those ages. The reality is that when we learn or discover people voice opinions about, well, then this group of kids is going to not have kind of their optimal learning time addressed, et cetera. We have to recognize that we already have a problem. This is not, there may be problems if we consider changes, but there actually is presently a problem. There are kids who are struggling to get through first and second periods. I've had one of them. We heard from community psychologists and counselors that they are seeing an upswing in stress, in anxiety, and all that kind of stuff. So I want us in any of these conversations to remind us that when we think about, well, if we change this problem occurs, we actually already have a problem, and we need to balance that. All I want to say. So thank you.
Well, thanks for your attention.
Others? Others? All right, nobody is jumping up. Board members, comments, questions?
I mean, just to follow on that comment, I also, would love to see the sleep schedule for the high school students in particular moved. I have 2 high school students that I get up at 6 a.m. and drag out of bed. And we were on that path to some degree. There was a budgetary implication, for potentially looking at it this year, and we really got set back, honestly, by the budget. The turnout was 14%, and we failed it by 41 votes, and that really had to, I agree it's an issue, and how much is it worth? I don't know, but when you really start cutting into the budget with that magnitude of expenses, you're talking about cutting into class sizes and things like that. So I think there is and there was a consensus on the board and even in the administration that this is an important issue. It's a health issue. It's a problem that we need to address. And so it's not off the radar entirely. Guilford is, as Mr. Bloss mentioned, a particularly difficult town with the busing. We looked at several options in just the north-south loop. I mean, the cost is, on the order of $500,000. So we would love to, revisit that, but we also, are balancing a lot of things. So I just want to also say that this is not something that I think we are pushing off forever. We realize there's a problem. We just need to figure out how to address it efficiently and with other interests in mind.
Let me go back to the public. Yeah, please. Sure, go ahead.
Gus Kellogg, 235 Boston Street. I'm going to wear both typical ed and special ed hat. I noticed that there's a sizable increase in special ed transportation, an increase of 27%, and I'm concerned about that not looking so great for people who don't know what that entails.
That is actually a byproduct in part of the program, some of the in-house programs that we're doing. The special ed transportation is not only kids that are being transported out of district or out of town to private schools and or public schools for that matter, in other communities. Sometimes there are children that are being educated in the regular schools, but they cannot take the school buses for whatever reason. There's a visual impairment, for example, or there's a mobility impairment or something else. We're still obligated to provide more significant transportation. And so as we bring some of these children back in district, we are actually adding to our special education transportation budget, not because they're being bused somewhere else, but because they're being bused to their home school.
Is this a catch up from like we budgeted last year and kind of blew
And actually
the budget?
there's a better budgeting. There's a budgeting. Do you want to talk about that, Ms. Trudeau?
Sure.
Why don't you come up here? Why are you sitting back there? What?
We were waiting to see when she'd come to the table.
There's actually just a budget, a better way of budgeting, I think, is maybe the way I would put it.
Right, so what we did this year was we looked at every student that we have that was being outplaced and looked at each individual cost and what our projected excess cost rate that we would receive for each student. And then we applied that excess cost grant that we would get for each student between the tuition and transportation. And it changed the formula for allocating the excess cost grant that we were going to receive. So that's part of the increase that's in that line. The other part is the needs of the students that are being transported in district.
And we have more students who require in-district transportation than we did 4 or 5 years ago because we've grown out the local programming.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Other board members? Come on, Mr. Sands, we have till midnight tonight.
Well, Mr. Bloss, I'm ready to go if you're ready.
Sure.
Why don't you give this to Mr. Bloss?
Okay, well, this is, these are some specific suggested reductions. I think one of the things we've talked about is Dr. Freeman's budget does not include any assumption of any particular number of teacher retirements. I think we all agree. I think that is something that we probably need to budget some number for, because when a teacher retires and who is at top step and is replaced by a teacher not at top step, there is by definition a savings, a salary savings. The trick to that is to have some idea about how many in non-high demand areas like science and math and foreign language there are in any one year. Sometimes there are very few, sometimes there are a lot. And actually that isn't a line that has resulted in our being able to meet our special ed tuition obligations from time to time.
Right. That's not a reduction that we've historically taken. At this point, we don't have any retirements in hand, and so it would be a matter of trying to project how many we could anticipate based on past year's experience And you're correct, trying to anticipate in what areas those might fall.
But it is unlikely
That we would have
that we'd
zero.
have zero, right?
Correct.
So I think we can safely budget for
Correct.
some number. Now, whether it's 4, 6, 3, 8, I mean, I think that's something we can talk about.
Yep.
I think that's completely fair.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know why I'm reading this. You want to read? You can read this. No? Okay. Good question. The question is whether we do really need 1.5 custodian increase. Is there some lesser number, either a half or a full, that would be feasible? I mean, obviously, again, the balancing. We want to take care of the high school,
Right.
having just spent a lot of money on the high school. But do you? What would be reasonable in that? The administrators at the high school, the deans, can they go to 10 months? That would save approximately $40,000. I think the trick on that is that we did add the international baccalaureate duties to
Correct.
one of them at a savings of a half a teacher. So that would,
Right.
but that's something to talk
Yep.
about. Yeah. Pension contribution. The good news, folks, for you who read the paper about the state pension funding situation, although it's not a very high hurdle, a very high bar, we are doing a lot better than the state of Connecticut in terms of its pensions. I haven't seen the report from the last actuary's report yet, but we are not far from being fully funded. It is a very manageable situation with our budget or our pension plan. Teacher pensions and administrator pensions are actually not the obligation of the town of Guilford. They are the obligation of the state of Connecticut. So we fund pensions to somewhere for non-covered employees somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 a year. I think your budget, Dr. Freeman, would I think it's about 530, okay. And then Mr. Sands' suggestion is we could reasonably reduce that to 480. And then if there is any leftover at the end of the year, that if there is rather than give that back to the town, the Board of Finance put it into that because we know we need to get that fully funded anyway. So,
Yeah,
okay.
and I would agree with Mr. Sands. I do believe there's room for a reduction there. I'm willing to recommend some reduction there. I don't know if it'd be exactly that figure. Mrs. Trudeau and the actuary are accepting of my position, although not recommending it themselves, but I do think that there's room for some reduction there.
Okay.
I agree with that recommendation.
And I guess I'm the only lawyer here. The suggestion is we'd reduce the legal services line by $15,000 because we had a lot of labor negotiations this year. And it was unprecedented. And that was partly, it seems quaint now, but it was partly because we wanted to do all of our negotiations this year so we could get as much certainty as we could for what was the status of the high-value insurance plans under the Affordable Care Act. And we were worried a couple of years ago about the lack of certainty in that area and don't seem to have secured much certainty over the last year, last 2 months. But in any event,
I believe the legal line was reduced over last year's. I think we made a reduction.
No.
That
might be, but on the other hand, we haven't had as many discipline hearings this year as we have in some years past.
Yeah, that's right. No, that is right. Right? I mean, we
We're
have.
halfway through.
Wait till spring.
But yeah, wait till spring, that's true.
It's seasonal. We're not lost on the seasonal aspect.
Correct.
But that's a possibility.
Correct.
Additional special ed legal.
Oh, that's also, yes, that is special ed legal as well.
There has
right?
been some special ed and some employment legal monies that have been,
True.
and some of those may extend over.
Okay, well, that's something to look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other suggestion would be site improvement line.
It's currently an increase of 130,000. There would be, the board could fund none or any amount of that increase.
Right. And just for, well, I mean, go ahead. Yeah.
So can I ask specifically about, because
I'm sorry?
this always happens when I start to talk.
Wow.
Tape doesn't like.
Saved by the tape.
What's that?
Okay.
Okay, we're back. Dr. Moore, you were,
Just on the custodian increase or reduction from increase, Cliff Garnham gave a bordered on an emotional speech last night, actually. I could feel his stress. I guess, and then objectively, in terms of benchmarking, square footage for custodians, do we have data on that, or?
We've been presented that data in prior years
Yeah.
by Cliff, right?
I think Cliff suggested that across the district, our custodians are responsible for something over 4,000 square feet apiece, and 40, I'm sorry. And Mr. Ailes suggested it was 25,000 would be industry standard, correct? And so we're working well beyond.
Mr. Ailes was here last night. But anyway.
Mr. Gurnham's original request was for 2.5 positions. My budget in front of you funds 1.5. Any increase would be a step in the right direction. Going up by a half a position would be an improvement. Going up by 1 position would be an improvement. Again, it becomes that balancing act. How much do we want to invest and how quickly do we want to increase that staffing?
So, industry standard, I'd be interested to see, obviously, there's an ideal, and then there's, a bit of a, comparison to, other similar districts, or, I just don't have a basis for objective comparison. I'm wondering, I know we may have done that.
No, I guess all I'm suggesting is we could probably get it, again, easily from Cliff.
Yes.
That's all I'm suggesting.
We can have that for you for Monday evening. We can have a breakdown of square footage.
But I think we also have to take into account the fact that the new high school was designed to be easier to maintain.
Well,
I'm
I'd be
not
interested
sure
to hear
that's
about that, because I'm
true.
not sure that's
Gets
entirely
more
true.
There's more square footage.
There are aspects of it.
There are aspects of it. So we took carpet out of the hallways, and so the hallways no longer require vacuuming as they did in the old building. The hallways we did with tile rather than with vinyl, so the hallways don't require waxing and buffing. But there's more hallways. The bathrooms are laid out better and are drained better, so that it is easier to clean a bathroom. But I think we have more bathrooms because we built more smaller bathrooms rather than fewer large bathrooms.
But like the sinks.
The high glass is an element we
There's
didn't.
more sinks, there's more science.
And there's more use.
What is accurate is that the building committee was very committed to ensuring that the building was built with resilient materials. And so tile will last longer than vinyl will. Many of the ceilings are done with hardwood slat rather than the white drop tiles. So they did invest in making sure that they're resilient, long-lasting materials. In some aspects, they require less maintenance, but there's some elements to the building that require more, like the high glass.
It would be interesting to see the numbers again, though, because I do remember, and I might not be correct, but I remember perhaps the numbers weren't equitable in terms of what custodians were responsible for at each school, particularly, I feel like it was here.
Yes, there was a difference in each school. And I apologize, I believe that Cliff had those figures with him last night. Didn't come up, we didn't distribute them, but we can have that out to you prior to Monday's meeting.
I'd like to throw out another consideration in terms of just additional custodial staff. I think the issue is, and I agree with Chris, Cliff was pretty descriptive of what they're dealing with, I think, and I taking that into consideration. But when you have reduced staff, what you also have is the staff that exist overworked, perhaps. And I think there's a consequence to that as well. And so I think I have thought of this in terms of my concern for the fact that we've built this brand new building and, we really owe it to the taxpayers to maintain it. Cliff suggested that they are not able to maintain it in the way that, or as thoroughly as they should. And, but I do think we then have staff in that building who are probably working harder or in a more stressful situation than would be optimum, and that has consequences too, whether it has consequences in turnover, whether it has consequences in absentee days, whatever. So, I am really in support of additional custodial staff for those reasons.
Okay, other thoughts, other Comments, questions?
So Ted, you came up with this list, is that accurate?
Yes.
How did you come up with a number of 178,000 on the site improvement line?
Because I was trying to get to $500,000.
Okay, I mean.
No, I mean, I didn't.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just was wondering if you were targeting.
This is just
specific.
a scoping.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was just wondering if there was a specific.
No.
Okay, I mean, because that's the area.
That's the one area there was not a specific recommendation.
Okay, because that's an area, as I've said over the years, that again, we've done a lot of work to try to make sure our facilities and infrastructure don't fall behind, and that is the area that does tend to get cut whenever we're looking at budget reductions. So I guess I'd like to know, what the impact of that would be if it seemed like we were getting towards a good number, or amount. I guess I should say amount of resources to do a lot of the things around. I mean, when we did the facilities needs assessment and some of the stuff that we were looking at, just maintaining the bricks and the pointing and like making sure that we take care of the things that are going to prevent longer term.
Yeah, we had built that line up to approximately 525,000. It allowed us to keep up or keep ahead of the maintenance concerns that we had. It also allowed us to stop rolling into bonding requests, small projects like a $35,000 well pump, because we were now able to manage that out of an annual budget. We cut that line by $250,000 last year. So we dropped almost half of what we had spent 5 years building up. The current budget in front of you looks to restore $130,000 of the $250,000 reduction last year. So I would suggest that anything within the $130,000 is movement towards returning to where we'd like to be. It doesn't have to be a full 130, but I'd like to see that if there's to be a reduction there, I'd like to see some growth back towards where we were at this time last year.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts for this evening? Okay, anybody else from the public want to, now that you've had a chance to?
I'd love to.
Please.
Try to make this brief for everybody here. Nate Jacobson, 1470 Long Hill Road. Main reason I wanted to come up is as I was leaving, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, the budget presentation at the high school. I think it was around 9:30, and it just got me reflecting and really appreciative of what you guys do. The incredible amount of really your own family's time, the thoughtfulness that you display, the public servant that we can't get up before you and voice our opinion on. If well-educated, thoughtful, dedicated people don't do what you guys do. So I just want to say thank you.
That's very nice.
Doesn't happen often.
I'm not inclined to allow any further comment.
Well, I don't know, there might be some other people.
Don't take a chance on it. I don't think so. So we have another meeting scheduled for Monday at 7:30 here, or at the
It's at the high school.
High school.
okay. And so we will talk about what we should do. We don't have to vote on Monday, by the way. We have to vote on the 13th, by the 13th, because we have to get it to the Board of Finance on the 14th. So I think it would be our goal to try to vote on Monday, but we've got some good ideas. If people, obviously we can talk or talk to Dr. Freeman between now and Monday and see where we go.
And people can also communicate with us,
Right.
all via email, or if people weren't able to make it tonight. I mean, we tend to hear a lot about the budget in April, or around budget time. But this is the time where we're really shaping it, and so I haven't really had a communication aside from I think the swim parents as far as budgetary concerns in the district, and so now's the time.
Right. And you were going to say?
I was just going to ask, I know when we talked last night briefly about the tuition line, there's a thought that we might have to increase that. Is there anything else we need to I can't imagine there's anything else that might have moved in the last couple of weeks like that we need to think about?
There may be one other item that I might suggest needs to be adjusted.
Okay.
It would be an item around legal, and Linda and I will discuss that. If there's, Mr. Sands' suggestions are helpful, because what I can do Monday night is come back prepared to respond to these, try to have any other areas that I think the board might want to look at. I believe that I directed the board in my letter to some areas that were discretionary, where there could be some movement, and around tuition and any other increases. I will be sure that if anything has changed upward in the last 5 weeks, that I will have that for you Monday evening, so that everything can be put on the table as you finalize your budget moving forward.
I just want to say also for the record that I, while all these suggestions, should certainly be taken into account and under our consideration, I'm concerned about an already very lean budget, and making too many cuts. I just think I think the public needs to know that we've already cut so much in the past, coming into this year, and these increases, are really minimal. And so I worry about, making serious cuts to an already, under 2% budget.
I would support that. I mean, I wonder how much farther below that, purely in a number standpoint, people feel the need to go, because I feel that if we can go in below 2, add a swim team, add back a cheerleading coach, start to improve on some of the reductions from the last budget season, the site improvement line, et cetera. I think we're in pretty good shape, and I think that this budget has come to us with a really thorough vetting. Certainly I was impressed as we sat with the district leadership team at the extent to which each of their budgets was further reduced before it even came to us. I'm also just very conscious of the fact that our budget only increased by 0.067 last year due to several failed referenda. So I am concerned that we don't, I would not want us to be shooting for a number or a percentage increase without being very careful about what that means. And I am comfortable under 2, but we can discuss that further.
Talk further about it. I noticed Trumbull came in and they asked for 3.5, and that's a comparable district to us. And I think Avon, wasn't Avon? I'm sorry, Mr. Bowden isn't here, but Avon was, I think.
Avon came in above 3, I believe. Yeah. Their initial board proposal was above 3. I think Avon may have added money to the superintendent's budget, if you guys want to try that.
Yeah.
Just in case.
I think you're right, and I think, thanks for the, Cheshire, I think, is also higher. It'd be interesting to see where those are coming in. Usually CABE sends that around.
I have the CAP spreadsheet. I will send out the CAP spreadsheet.
And I have CASBO's ones I can
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
I just gave our superintendent's number to CAPS today, so that'll be on. I can distribute that to everybody as well.
I think that'd be.
And everybody's on a different calendar, so some of those will list as superintendent's budget, some will list as board-approved budget. If I may, Mr. Bloss, I just want to note that instructionally, one of our highest priorities in this budget is the implementation of math coaching. I appreciate that no board members have suggested that as we've started looking at reductions, and I know it was in my letter to you. I just want to reiterate on behalf of the whole leadership team that we really believe that that is an improvement as time has come. We deferred it last year. We've seen what it's done for our students in their literacy performance. We do feel it's time to bring that support into the district.
Just so people know about that, it's called coaching, and really what it is embedded professional development.
That's right.
And I'm sorry, but some of these education world labels, just for the rest of us, it's a little hard. But in any event, we've had by all of the objective data, our performance in literacy and English language arts is way above where it should be, just looking at purely socioeconomic issues. We're at the lower end of our comparable school group, and our literacy scores district-wide are outstanding.
At the top of the group and at the top of the state.
I mean, like behind Westport and Wilton, that level in several of the grades. We've also, and our math scores are good, and our performance in that area is very good, but it's not equivalent to literacy. So what does that mean? Is there a reason for that? Well, whenever there's a distinction like that, there's almost always a reason. One distinction, and I'm not sure it's the only one, but one distinction is that we have had literacy embedded professional development, teachers who teach teachers, basically, for the past 7 years. It was the year before you got here. And so our performance in literacy has actually demonstrably improved. Math, not as much, and I think all of us think it's probably time to move toward that model of embedded professional development in the math arena because of what we've seen.
So while we appreciate your care and focus around the cost, we very much appreciate your support for that instructional initiative. And in my mind, it is the single greatest priority embedded in this budget proposal in front of you.
The other thing I would just mention instructionally, just so the public's aware, I mean, we look very closely at the class sizes, and I appreciate the detail to which the administration prepares the numbers in pretty much each class going down to an elementary level, so we can watch the numbers that are neither too low nor too high, or I should say the other way around. We don't go too low. If they go too low, we do reduce the teaching staff, which we've done. And it's, the enrollment numbers haven't always gone up, but when we often hear, and I say this I think every year, but people who are like, we need a 0% budget. And you just need to keep in mind that the negotiations, the way that we have to perform those, the staff that we're negotiating with, for example, the teachers, the overall increase will be about 3%, per year in terms of the salary. And that is something that really we can't just go to 0% on that. It's just not possible in the environment that we're in terms of the legal ability to negotiate. So the only way to really cut like millions of dollars from the budget is to get into class sizes. And that's something that is our first priority. And I just want the public to be aware that that's the first thing that I look at when I look at the budget, is to make sure that that's maintained. So.
And Dr. Moore, it's also important to note we do have a slightly different audience tonight. Part of that negotiation did in fact result in the savings of millions of dollars in that while we maintained fair salaries for our teachers and competitive, we want to be competitive with the school districts. This board's negotiation over the last 2 cycles, 4 years of negotiating with 5 different bargaining units, has resulted in a change in medical benefits that will save this district $500,000 this year. And the board does deserve credit for those negotiations and for that savings.
Well, and the staff and faculty also deserve
Absolutely.
credit for
and we do need to be fair and competitive as well. I mean, in terms of
that's right. I mean, it's got to be in line, or else you can't be an outliner.
Excuse me. Being under 2 is a very good place. But being mindful of the issues we had last spring with the voting, I think it's important for us to get to our best number so that I do support the math coaching and obviously the lower class sizes. So putting our best number forward so that we're not in a position to have to look at that math coaching for a second year in terms of eliminating it would be my position.
Okay. Well then, unless there's anything else, we can entertain a motion to adjourn for today and then come back and see each other on Monday. Is there a motion?
A few nights off.
Right? A couple of nights off, right. Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.